This is what most of people think about hemp.
No volume.
Okay, volume man. Gary, I'm on volume now. Just a minute, man. I'm not in a hurry. Who's got a light? Okay, good. Now we're all relaxed. We can begin. A lot of people think hemp is just a hippie culture thing, but hemp's been around for thousands of years. And today I'd like to tell you about all of its modern uses, and also the fact that hemp is now making a big resurgence back into the modern world, so to speak. But years ago, well, when I was a youth, that was a big thing, you know. Then the drug war, the drug culture came in, and then there was a lot of controversy about hemp. But as you all know, all of you here anyway, the average person who I talk to says, is it the same as marijuana? And well, actually it is. It's exactly the same plant. Marijuana is a used word from the culture from Mexico. And back in the 50s, a lot of people that were using it were artists, because of its obvious effects of changing your perception, and musicians. A lot of the good music that came out, jazz and various, you know, alternative types of music from the traditional classical music, came from the influence of that drug. But recently I'm just getting into my real hemp clothes now. Recently I was asked by a friend, you know, when did you first get involved with hemp? And I said, well, actually, if I could be totally honest, it was when I was 13 years old. And I smoked a joint with some friends. And it was a very interesting experience, because I've since become involved in psychology and doing naturopathy and a lot of health things. But I'm not advocating drugs here today either, folks. But in our culture, we use drugs all the time, such as alcohol, tobacco, caffeine. Caffeine is a drug, and it's socially acceptable. But at that time, at that young age, everybody was saying, well, what is this about, you know? Because we're told a certain thing, you know, we go to Sunday school, we go to school. We have these parents that have a certain understanding, and we're given this information in trust that these people do know what they're talking about. But meanwhile, where's that button gone? Meanwhile, there's, does this work? Is it on? Okay, yeah, good. So, meanwhile, we have this assumption that what we're being told is a fact when you're a small child. But in reality, that very first experience I had, where it altered my perception, was quite profound. And what I experienced was time didn't exist. I experienced where an event would occur, like I would say something or move somewhere, and then I would notice that that event was finished, and it was absolutely crystal clear in my mind that I was living absolutely in the now. And it was like the film, like many of you have seen, The Matrix, where that original belief structure just started crumbling, and then what I thought was real became not real. What I thought was reality became, well, is that really reality? And I think that's quite profound. And there have been for millennia a lot of alternative types of you know, cultures, or should I say Aboriginal cultures in different parts of the world, who have used these mind-altering substances from plants. And what they are doing is they're imbibing the spirit of that plant, and they're actually learning from the plant. And most of the people who have only used THC, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, the drug active constituent in hemp, they don't just get stoned all day and do nothing and be dopey. Those are a certain part of the culture who have psychological problems, who want to avoid their pain or whatever it is. But there are other individuals who use substances to explore an alternative perception. Even a guy like Aldous Huxley, who took mescaline and wrote a whole book on it, because he realized that what we see and what we perceive isn't exactly as you believe. Anyway, I won't go on about that too much. I just thought that was a funny thing that he asked me, the friend asked me, and what was your real experience? But presently, I'm not really involved in the drug scene, and I know there are many, many uses for hemp or THC medicinally that you can use to help various ailments. But I'm a naturopath, so my whole goal is actually to repair the person by natural means, and that means I don't want to actually suppress the symptoms. So if a person has multiple sclerosis, which could be helped by using THC, I would be more inclined to say, well, why have you got multiple sclerosis? Let's go backwards and say, what's the cause of your problem? Not let's just put a bandage over that. Let's put it into the context of where it really belongs, which is something's out of balance here, something's out of harmony. So hopefully through this talk you will be enlightened about how that can happen actually through hemp from a nutritional aspect, through the seed meal and the oil. And there's many, many, many degenerative diseases that relate back to the lack of these nutrients in the body. So going back to the original question from my friend, why did we get involved in hemp? Well, about 10 years ago, I started working with some individuals in Australia who were building monolithic domes. And I was quite fascinated by that. And I thought, well, this is great. I want to do that because a dome is the most profound structure because it's the original form of all geometric forms, the sphere, or it's a hemisphere. So we got this prototype which is involving using steel, and I thought, well, why can't we do something organic? So I went to a shop and I met this guy there, and he said, oh, how's the domes going? And I said, yeah, but it's going all right. I want to get something organic that we could utilize in this material in building the structures. And he said, well, why don't you grow hemp? And I said, well, that would be great, but you know, we already understood about hemp's strength. And I said, that's a great idea, but it's not legal. And he said, well, here. And he showed me the newspaper article, and they'd just legalized it in Queensland. So I went straight out and got a license. So in North Queensland, I was the first person to grow industrial hemp. But there's a load of politics around that. The DPI is the department that puts out the licensing for that, and that's fairly fair and balanced how they're doing it, but it can take a long time, and they have criminal checks, and that's good. But then you can't get seeds. Now, I'd love to give everybody in this audience a kilo of seed to take home today to grow in your garden, because I really truly believe that hemp is the plant that we all need to have for our future and for our well-being. But of course, that's still illegal for me to do that. Anyway, going back to the beginning of that, going to find seed in Australia is very difficult because there's a monopoly on the seed. So what I had to do is I had to go overseas and I had to find my own seed. I went to a university in China who had 180 varieties. This is actually one of the varieties that I collected from them. I got 16 different varieties overall from various parts of the world, but this is the one that I personally grow, and I call it King G. The gentleman who gave me the seeds was from a long line, a lineage of kings. And but of course that's obsolete now in China, but his family name is G, and that was a really ancient emperor. So, but these plants here, that particular plant grew up to 7.5 meters. So we were after the fiber for the plants to grow, to produce these fibers for the domes, and that's what we ended up with. And we had to chop them down with chainsaws. The university came by, the university in North Queensland, James Cook University, and they said they wanted to do a study with me, and that was great. But when he saw these plants, he was just completely astounded. And they said that the plants at that size, if it was a pine tree, it would take 5 years to get to that size. So in 6 or 7 months, which these plants, they're trees, these plants can grow for a very long period of time because they're a tropical variety. They can grow up to 7 and 8 meters high, but that's not very practical as far as using the material for building applications, because nobody wants to go around and have to chop down things with a chainsaw. So the real way that it's grown now is much more dense, which I'll be explaining as we go along here. I'd just like to give you a brief history of hemp. So there is, as I said, there's an ancient past history in hemp. There's been sites from Mesopotamia, which are over 1,000 years old, using the biocrete, which I'll be showing you shortly. Biocrete is a type of lime and hemp fiber mixed together. And there's also been sites where they've found people's garments that are really ancient, 6,000 years, I believe, which were originally made from hemp. Hemp's the most durable fiber that there is, so it is often found in these ancient sites where people's shoes were made out of hemp, or all of the old books in the world that are still around are made from hemp. You have people where they found mummies where they had hemp inside their body, like a woman that died giving childbirth. So, and then I found a very interesting piece of folklore when I was visiting Patsy Harmson in Tasmania. She's the lady that some of you might have seen her on video, and she was one of the original pioneers in Australia to get hemp back into the scene. Her and her husband Fritz, they pioneered some crops back in 1991, but they have an amazing library of hemp. Anyway, she had this book, and it was all about the folklore of hemp, and one of them in there that was quite shocking when I read it was about witches' broomsticks. And we all know about witches, don't we? And they fly on brooms, right? Well, this recipe was actually the flying broomstick recipe. So I thought, well, that's good. I wonder what it is. And I read through the herbs. And I'm a herbalist myself, so I recognized a lot of those herbs. There was mandrake. There was a flying Spanish fly. And one of the main components of it was the marijuana plant, or the cannabis sativa. But then the recipe involved grinding up all of the herbs in a mortar and pestle and then mixing tallow with it, or fat. And then it was put onto a broomstick and put into these people internally. I won't tell you which orifice that it went in, but after that they were flying for a long time. And that's actually what the recipe was. And that's where that folklore of witches' broomsticks and flying broomsticks came from, because they were just wild, going off their brains, you know, having... If you take these substances through your bloodstream, they last for a long time, in fact, sometimes days. I've had that experience by accident through ingesting it, not knowing that it was going to happen. So 3 days later, I was like, woo, okay. So I'd love to talk to you about witches, because I have a really interesting history and story about that, but we'll just move on here. Otherwise, we won't get to the end of the talk. So during the Industrial Revolution, many of you know this already, so I won't go into it for a long time, but hemp was most prized by almost all the industrial countries in the world, because it was used for ropes, ship sails, the uniforms for the soldiers and the sailors, and it was pretty much the staple fiber of that time to make us be able to go out and conquer the world and sail the seas and you know, basically move this whole industrial process forward. And a lot of people don't know that the World War I was primarily fought over who was going to control the hemp production in the world. That's one of the big factors. There's probably a lot more underneath that, as you all know, about the controlling people out there, but that was a really big issue. And it wasn't the drug trade, it was the fiber, the textiles. So that was such a big thing that the Russians were fighting in they were fighting in North America, and all the forefathers of North America, like the United States, they all grew hemp. Hemp was a big crop then, and I think many of you already do know that, but it was to the point where you had to actually pay your taxes with hemp. So that's how we were taxed. I think they should bring that one back, because I hate paying taxes, and I don't like the whole way that we're still stuck in that feudal system. Anyway, the thing that changed the whole motion of that happening, where hemp was going to go forward, hemp actually got, the problem with hemp is it has a very long, very hard, strong fiber in it, and it is actually the longest natural fiber that there is. The problem is that they created this special way of harvesting and then processing the hemp in an industrial method that would then now compete with cotton, because cotton was only just, they created a cotton gin to make the fiber better. But at that point in time, there were also these people, I don't need to give out the names because most of you have heard of it, but people that were involved in making chemicals and various media people, they actually created this whole we've got to get rid of this plant. They created this whole conspiracy basically about growing industrial hemp, because they wanted nylon on the market. They wanted the chemicals to produce paper from trees to be used. So it was one of those same old stories of, we want our product on the market, so we're going to get rid of you. And hemp's a natural leader. It has more uses than any other single plant. So because it was too good, they had to get rid of it. And that's where it was demonized and turned into this evil thing. And there's films on, they made films to say to people, if you take this, you're going to go insane and you'll probably kill your relatives. And it just doesn't work like that. I've never seen anybody fight when they're smoking marijuana. It's different if you drink alcohol. Nobody ever dies from smoking marijuana. There's so many deaths attributed to alcohol use, and none of them are attributed to marijuana. People that take marijuana, they just fall asleep and they don't bother anybody, So that was, anyway, the whole thing that changed that. And then after that point, there was prohibition, so that we then had to not have that plant available. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, in Eastern Europe and Russia, those people have never stopped growing it, and China's never stopped growing it. I guess there's a lot of countries that have still used it, but it's never been really, truly brought into the industrial world in a way that makes it come to its full capacity. And that's where I think it's going now, and I really, really want to see that work, because it's the most important thing to save our ecology, etc. Let's see, what have I got in here? I keep talking too much, and here we go. Oh, hey, where did he come from? So basically, all of your things that you require for life can be supplied by this one single humble plant. You can get food, fuel, paper, wood products, textiles, cosmetics, oil. All of the things you need for life can come out of that plant. So it is vitally important that we keep it going. This is a more explicit list of all the different uses for hemp. And if anybody wants to, I have the brochures at the counter there, so you can come and there's copies of all this on the website. So it's just really important for people to educate themselves. A few years ago, I worked studying common law and what that was about. And very often, people will say to me, why are we not growing this? What's going on? Why has this come to a halt? And whenever I grow hemp, if there's a new police officer in town, a constable, I'll say, oh, come over to my house and we'll have a cup of tea and I want to tell you all about what I'm doing. I want to make them very comfortable with that, because it's right in front of the road, Anyway, after I give them the spiel and say, and you can do this and this and this, and I tell them all these good things, they all sit there and they go, that's amazing. Why isn't everybody growing it? Well, there's an obvious reason why everybody isn't growing it, and that is just those laws that have stopped us for all that time. Okay, I would say at least 1 out of every 3 people I speak to, adults, has tried it. I'd say 1 out of every 10 people I meet has grown it. So there's no way that it's going to stop. It's just there is also a mafia connection to this too. It's the same old thing, you know. If we can make money out of it, we're not going to let you just have it. We'll just hold on to it and we'll control it, and that way it'll be more difficult and we'll make more revenue. It's the old revenue thing, you know. So anyway, this is actually the reason I got into hemp, was to actually incorporate it into construction. There's no reason whatsoever that we should chop down trees anymore. And a forester that I was speaking to brought up a really valid point, and I never thought of that before. He said it. You know, I said, well, you know, they're doing plantation forests, so if we chop down the trees, we can grow them again. And I was going to bring in a nasty forestry picture from Tasmania that I took this year, showing you the clear felling, but I'd like to focus more on the positive sides of it. But what he said to me anyway is, the difference is when you chop down an old tree that might be a couple of 100 years old, that tree has got really, really strong fiber in it. It's grown for a long time. It's been through winds and storms and droughts and floods and whatever. It's been through a lot of condition because it's still there. It's survived through a lot of different struggles. But he said in a plantation forest, they grow it for 20 years, they harvest it, and that's it. And then what you end up is a very weak piece of wood. That's why a lot of old houses are still standing and they are sound. And then new houses, people build them, and then the next thing they're full of termites because they're just weak. It's just, it doesn't make sense. If we go to hemp, this is a picture of hemp fiber that's actually used as insulation. The hemp fiber is in tensile strength, it's 4 times greater than steel. It's light as a feather. If you come over, I'll show you some samples of what that can look like and how light that fiber is. And as I said before, it's the longest natural fiber. So if all things are equal, the length of the fiber if you say make a board with hemp, that ends up being the strongest structure you can have because the integrating of the fibers makes it stronger. If you compare hemp to fiberglass, it is double the strength of fiberglass. And if you take hemp oil, you can actually turn it into a resin. You don't need toxic resins that off-gas poison all the time. You can take hemp oil, turn that into a resin, apply it to the hemp fiber, and you can have 100% organic type of fiberglass. Or you can put that fiberglass in the roof of your house or in your walls. But we've actually developed another system. These are some samples of different raw materials that are processed to then make the next thing, which are pressed board and, as I said before, the fiberglass. The car industry has started using hemp, and they use it in the internal panels. And as many of you know, that Henry Ford years ago built a car using hemp fiber, and you couldn't break it even with a sledgehammer. It wouldn't even dent. It just bounces off. Like I said, it's twice as strong as fiberglass. So I'd like to see a hemp Holden. Wouldn't that be great? HHH. We could be the first ones in the world with the hemp car, the hemp mobile. And we could burn hemp cellulose ethanol in the car. We're going to cover the ethanol thing too, because that's pretty amazing how much ethanol you can make from hemp. So this is a picture of a close-up of one of the buildings that we built up in North Queensland. That is a wall that contains what we call biocrete, or hemp mixed with lime. Now, they've found sites in Mesopotamia that are over 1,000 years old, and they have these aqueducts and bridge foundations which are still standing. And when the scientists found these, they thought, that's amazing. We've never seen any concrete in the present time last that long without starting to decompose and erode. So they pulled it apart and studied it, and what they found out was the hemp fiber, the core of the hemp plant, is very rich in silica. And silica, when you mix it together with lime, actually becomes a new chemical composition, and that composition petrifies. So what you're ending up with is more like stone. And that's why those bridges and aqueducts are still there. And it also creates a matrix of silicates with that bind with the lime that create a water resistance. So because silica is a natural water repellent. So we've actually put silicates into our formula, added it in, because we don't exactly have the right lime in Australia, but just up the road we have a diatomaceous earth mine, which is really fortunate because that is the richest source in the world of pure silicates. It's an organic silica. So essentially what you're going to get when you build a building like this, and we can do full walls with that, it's very lightweight, very cheap to produce. You could, a ton of hemp is a massive amount. It's like popcorn. It's so light. And what you end up with is super insulation properties. So say if you have 25 mils of this material, that would be equivalent to about 150 mils of fiberglass in heat resistance. That's enormous. In the building industry, that is a huge, huge importance, especially now because all the houses are now having to be built with power consumption and cooling and heating factors built into them. You have to have the right kind of windows and the right kind of insulation. So it is a really important factor. And the other thing is it has sound resistance. So if this building, for example, was made out of hemp, and you had a really loud concert going on in here, nobody outside would even hear it, because it would just hold the sound in the walls and it would stop there. The other thing that it's been used for, and a lot of the old castles and old monasteries and things in Europe, they were built with certain kinds of lime which have broken down, and there's a lot of damp leakage comes into the buildings, and so what they've done is they've taken this kind of material, this hemp biocrete, and they've put it on the walls or on the floor where it's damp. Because it's water resistant, it's like putting down a cork floor. Once that goes down, that water never comes through again. So it's got so many applications, it's unbelievable. But presently we're building a building which the whole walls will be made out of that material. We've done the dome structures, which, I don't know, there's one of our domes. That's me up on the scaffold, and one of my helpers there. We're just finishing it off as we take over those panels off of the walls. That's actually where we're housing our little factory for producing all these products. And we've got a couple of other prototypes that we're using where you will actually just be able to rotate the mold and pour it straight on the site. But this is a more laborious effort, that one. That's the finished product. Just to show you how it can come out. Now, this is just a piece about the environmental impact of hemp. If you compared, say, hemp to cotton, what's remarkable is cotton is the single most polluting crop that is being grown in the world. It uses enormous amounts of pesticide, it uses enormous amounts of water, it degrades the soil at a very, very rapid rate. And it's not that great of a fiber. We all wear cotton and it's a lovely, lovely fiber, but you can produce the same kind of beautiful texture, in fact more silky than cotton using hemp, and it will outlast cotton 5 times. But on a growing level, if you grew hemp on a paddock of land instead of growing cotton, you would use 1/4 of the amount of water. You would use no pesticides. You would use no herbicides because you don't need it. Hemp has a natural canopy which drowns out the weeds below, and it also has this ability to keep insects away from it. And so there was a farmer down here around Dalby or inland from here, and apparently he was growing cotton and the guys next door grew hemp. And at the end of the season he came over and he said, you know, all my plants that were growing next to your hemp didn't get bugs because the hemp made this energy and it went away. And people say, well, what is that? What is that that does that? And this is my understanding of it, is that if you're stressed out or you feel threatened, you sweat or you produce underarm deodorant, underarm smells. You will produce a fragrance. The more stressed out a hemp plant becomes, if you don't water it or you torture it a bit, that's going to make the THC or the tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the cannabinoids, that's the smell that it makes. That fragrance is the cannabinols in there. So it's like somebody who's really stressed out will get a very strong smell. So that plant's saying, I don't want you to eat me, please get away. And I believe that the people that grow it commercially for the exciting effects, they torture their plants in secret, They do all these, yeah, I've heard that. I won't tell you who I've been speaking to, but yeah, so that's really interesting. So when you go back to the land and you grow hemp, what hemp also does is, more than any other crop, it will repair the land, because as hemp's growing, all the leaves fall down. So you start building up humus, and also it gets a very deep taproot, so you open up the soil. But the other beautiful thing that hemp does is it draws enormous amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere. I'll just read this quote here from Andrew Catalaris. He says, hemp is very effective at eliminating carbon dioxide from the environment. Every ton of cellulose grown and used removes 1.5 tons of carbon dioxide. So for example, if we grew 200 hectares of hemp, we could, averaging a yield of around 12 tons, which is maybe, it's anywhere between 12 and 15 tons per hectare. This would use about 36 million tons of carbon dioxide. That's a lot of carbon dioxide. So when you talk about the greenhouse effect, if we were all starting to grow hemp and then producing, instead of chopping down our trees, producing our building material from this, we would end up usurping all of this carbon out of the atmosphere. And the other thing we would do is start repairing the ground, and we could stop chopping down the trees. Every single thing you can make with trees, you can make out of hemp. In Germany, they use hemp fiber. They have some kind of device where they mash it all up, and in the hemp fiber there's a kind of glue. It's called lignin. But all plants have lignins. Trees have more lignin than hemp, because that's why you have to use a lot of chemicals to break it down so you can turn it into paper. But the lignin's a type of glue. So if you just mash it all up and you extrude it, you end up with a really, really glued up hard piece of wood-like material. And there's a company called Hempstone. They're making instruments like didgeridoos, drums, guitars, that kind of thing. It's very hard. You can smash it and it won't do anything. But if we were going to build buildings with that, you could create a universal beam, for example, at probably a fraction of the weight of steel, and it would be probably equally in strength, or maybe even greater. I don't know. I haven't learned all of those things. I'm just reporting what I have learned so far. Okay, so the other thing is, when we grow plants to create to use up the carbon, what happens with a lot of plants is then they're used in a way which they get burned or used to create more carbon again. When you put hemp fiber into a wall, that's called entombing. You lock that carbon in there forever, well, until the building falls down and rots back into the ground. But basically, you're locking that carbon up again. So one of our big environmental problems, as we've all heard over and over and over again, is that the carbon thing is a big deal, and it is. Years ago, they did these tests up in the Alps in Switzerland, where they tested the oxygen levels of the Earth. And then they took core samples from 200 years before, where the cores from the ice had around 35% oxygen available. Now we're down to, even in the cleanest places, about 18%. I'm not talking about in Tokyo or something, you know. We're talking just really nice out in the nature. So a lot of the oxygen's gone out of the atmosphere because it's been bound up by these carbons. Carbon-14 is one of them. That's another topic, again, we could elaborate on. But so it is very important for us to grow the hemp. Now, paper, if you grow hemp and you produce paper out of that, you don't need to chop down trees. You can grow 4 times the volume of material for fiber to produce paper or building products. You can grow 4 times that material on a piece of land that would take you 20 years to grow trees. In 2 years, you can grow the same volume of woody material, of fiber, for these papers. Now, when you make hemp paper, what happens is it's so strong that you can recycle it 8 times. This is actually just craft paper, but hemp can be just turned into normal paper like we see writing paper. It uses far less chemicals to produce. The textiles are tremendous. Levi jeans were the original hemp trousers that were made years ago, and that's why they were famous, because they actually made them out of old sails. When the sails on the ships broke, they said, oh, well, we'll take those and we'll turn them into these Levi jeans. And they dyed them with indigo and they became blue jeans. And the other thing is they also used those leftover fibers and made paper with that. But they have an image on the Levi jeans where there's two horses and they're pulling the jeans apart. And that's because farmers used to take them and tie them to their horse out in the paddock. If their rope broke, they'd pull off their trousers and they'd hook up the plow to the horse and the plow, and then they'd pull it with that because the pants wouldn't break. They were that strong. And that's why Levi's were famous and still are around. It was like an institution of the blue jean. And that is because it is such a strong fiber. We've actually been trying to bring a line of hemp into Australia. Some of you have seen the samples there. I'm trying to get a really nice thing going with that, with 100% hemp. But it's unfortunately right now the only place that makes really high quality hemp fiber is in China. This is a lady from a factory that I've been working with in China. And they're just beautiful people. They've been growing hemp for thousands of years. It's part of their culture. In Japan, when a new emperor takes over the reins from the old emperor, he has to wear a complete outfit out of hemp clothing. So it's a very traditional garment use. It's very nice to wear. Everybody I talk to who's bought hemp clothes, they always say, oh, I just love my hemp shirt or my hemp pants or my shorts. Once they get them, they just wear and wear forever. And the lady I was speaking to yesterday, she said she got hemp sheets given to her on her wedding. And they're, what, about 40 or 50 years old, and they're still perfect. Because that's how long they last, you know. And the wedding's still going, the marriage is still going too, so there you go. Hemp, you know, maybe if we all get hemp, we'll never get divorced. Okay, hemp plastics is just another application of hemp. This is just a composite of hemp and actually real plastic, but technically speaking, you can turn hemp into cellulose or proper plastics. It's just a matter of chemistry bringing it to that point. Yeah, it's... Plastics is a funny thing. I know we use plastic in everything, and then lady said yesterday, why aren't we having hemp plastic bags? Well, I'd like to have a factory for all of these things, but I just don't have a spare $50 million right now. At least with this product here, when it gets discarded into the trash, it will become biodegradable. And that's the beautiful thing about it. Okay, there's just our product range. Most of you have seen that. So in the most valuable thing that I've discovered so far with hemp, which I had no idea about before I actually started growing it, was the seed value, the food value. Hemp seeds contain an amazing array of nutrients. So all these products here are made with hemp seed oil. And that's about the size of the hemp seed. Are there any farmers here in the audience? Farmers? Oh, there's one over there. We had a few farmers yesterday, and they're all really interested. A lot of farmers would like to grow hemp, but it's just, we need the market to do it. So going back to, I think I lost the track on that one, but going back to when I was talking about the legal implications, if there was a market for hemp, everybody would buy it. Everybody would use it. Then the farmers would be able to grow it. But what's stopping hemp from getting into the real mainstream is just education. And I really like to thank Duncan and the team for allowing me to come today and speak to you, because you're a very open-minded audience. And hopefully we can utilize this information in the future and spread it around, because people often say, why don't they do this? And they're referring to the government. Sorry, people, we are the government. We are the people that make it happen. And when you empower yourself and you choose to make that change, that's when it will change. Don't wait for them to do it. And this is why I feel it's very important to educate people about hemp, because if you're educated, you can make a decision for yourself. If you're being fed the information, you know, you usually follow what you're told or what you believe is true because somebody gave you that information. So that's just one of our products containing hemp seed. The content of hemp, the protein in hemp, is one of the most important things. Hemp seed has complete balance of amino acids. And when I say amino acids, I'm talking about all of the essential amino acids. I've just done this little diagram to explain how amino acids work. So this is sort of school here, but If you look at the top illustration with that little chain, this is very, very simplistic. This isn't what it looks like, of course. The key, in order for us to build healthy cells, we need complete protein. Now, there are what we call essential amino acids. And those essential amino acids, there's 8 of them. If you're a small child, or you need 10. And if you're an immature or premature infant, you might need more than that, 11, I think. But basically, most people don't get all their protein because they're always cooking their protein. So the next illustration below is showing an incomplete chain of protein. So this is what happens to a lot of us. We eat protein. We eat cheese and meat and fish and eggs and all that. But what happens is, as soon as you cook that protein, you destroy 2 of the essential amino acids. Oh. That was good. So the essential amino acids are essential. That was good, wasn't it? Whew. That's what happens when you take your amino acids. You get the full thing. Too bad that it wasn't on the film. Okay, so amino acids are necessary to build all your cells in your body, as you know. But what most people don't know is when you cook protein, you destroy 2 of the essential amino acids. That's why it's really important to eat raw food. Most people eat a lot of cooked food. And the more you eat cooked food, the more hungry you feel, because you're just not getting what you need. I see people eat loads and loads of meat all the time, and they're just like, gotta have protein, gotta have protein. But they're actually starving for protein because they're not getting it. They just keep cooking and cooking their protein. You never see dingoes roasting their lamb over the fire. We're the only creatures that eat cooked food. So when you eat hemp seed as a food, what you're doing is you're getting complete protein. You're getting double the amount of protein as meat. The highest normal meat people eat, protein rather, is chicken. That's only about 14 or 15% protein. So the rest is fiber, and it takes a lot of energy to digest. The beautiful thing about hemp seed is it's very easy to digest, and it's delicious. And next year we hope to bring dehulled hemp seed onto the market, which is technically illegal. By the way, you're not supposed to eat hemp seed. You can give it to your cow or your horse or your dog or your cat, but our government, in their wisdom, hasn't made legislation that says hemp's okay for us. But I hope all of you have animals that you can feed it to. Okay, so just going back to the protein thing. If we eat raw proteins, then our body has that building blocks, and we also need a lot for the brain and the thing. The oil in hemp seed is unsurpassed. Now, like amino acids, you need essential fatty acids. Those are the 2 omegas, which we call omega-6 and omega-3. I could go into a long... I need actually about a week to do these talks, because I love telling people about nutrition. It's what makes our body right. So if you get it right, you feel great. I've got another year till I turn 50, and I just feel better and better every year, because I just think, I want to live for a long time. I want to keep going and get the maximum juice out of this experience, But this fatty acid thing is amazing. When I eat hemp oil, I can work all day long, and I don't feel tired. It's like putting rocket juice into your tank. A lot of people think they're getting essential fatty acids because they get this margarine and it's got a tick on it. The Heart Foundation condones this stuff, Unfortunately, that doesn't mean it's going to give you what you're after. So most people are deficient in omega-6 and omega-3. Most people are really, really low amounts of that in their system. Hemp seed contains a really good ratio of 1 part of omega-3 to 3 parts of omega-6. And it's about 90% omegas, including gamma-linoleic acid, which is the same as evening primrose oil. So that's a precursor for making your hormones in your body. So all of your hormones in your body and every single cell in your body needs these oils. That's why they're called essential. The cell membrane, I think I got a photo in here. Oh, this is the structure of a fatty acid. So what we have is we have a water-soluble or insoluble fat connected. Depends how long the chains are, but you have carbon, and it's connected to a glycerin molecule. I'm not really great on my chemistry, but if you want to go into the nitty-gritties of it, the best book on that subject is Udo Erasmus's Fats That Heal and Fats That Kill. But basically, the superunsaturates, which are your omega-3 and 6, are, wait a minute, the superunsaturates, those are the ones that have very loose bonds. So even if you put that oil in the freezer, it won't go hard. It'll stay soft because it's superunsaturated. So that means it's biologically available for a lot of different functions. It's very loose. You can mix it with something and it breaks down in your food easily. It disperses easily. Saturated fats, like coconut, are very hard. We need saturated fats too because that's what gives you energy, so you can, have energy to burn. Unfortunately, what happens with a lot of people is they get too much saturated fat in their system. This is just a simple diagram of what happens with oils. Using corn for an example, that's about how much corn you need to get 1 tablespoon of oil. So it's a very, very processed thing. And then what they do is they boil it and they hydrogenate it, which means they add more hydrogen molecules into it. They whip it up, so to speak. Well, what that does is it twists the chain of those fats. There's good oil in corn too, if you could get it straight up, but you're better off to eat corn. So that makes it hard to make margarine or for oils that won't go off. The boiling process totally destroys your essential fatty acids. So everything you see on the supermarket shelf that's in a clear bottle is dead. You're not going to get any essential fatty acids out of that. The original plant, yes, has that essential fatty acid, but once you cook it, you destroy that. And once you do this, it's even further deranged in such a state that when it enters your body, it acts as a poison. So, let's see here. As I said, the grains are processed in a way where they're crushed. Then they put it with either water or sometimes other chemicals. They put lye in it. They bleach it. They deodorize it. Then they heat it again to get rid of the water in it. And then eventually it gets put in a bottle and they call it food. But this is what happens, is it becomes an actual little free radical guy. Because your cells can't use it. It's completely useless. So let's just look at this diagram. This is your blood on the left side, your bloodstream, rather a vessel. And a normal red blood cell can fold itself up and it just travels through the capillaries and the arteries in the body. But when it sticks together, such as when we eat these twisted fats, what happens is it clumps up in front of those little capillaries because they're very small. The blood cell has to fold up to go in there. But because it's all glued together, it can't move. And it gets trapped in the pathway. One of the very first things that goes on people is your eyes. And that's because those little teeny capillaries that feed your eyes are so tiny that as soon as you get a few blobs of that in the way, it's like game over. So you get, I actually work with eyesight a lot, but you get the degenerative diseases, retinal problems and macular degeneration and just straight old, I can't read anymore, I need the arms aren't long enough. That's called old age sight. So I originally wore glasses years ago for a little while, and then I thought, this is ridiculous. If you break your leg, you get crutches and then your foot heals. But if you put glasses on, then you're wearing them for the rest of your life. It just doesn't add up. So we've seen a lot of people actually heal their eyesight just through changing the diet and cleaning the system out. There's lots of ways to do that. Okay, so when you go to the cells, when you get that where you're not getting the nutrients to your skin, which is in the periphery of your body, what happens is those cells aren't getting fed. They're not getting a fresh supply of blood cells, and they're not getting oxygen, and they're not getting nutrients. So the cell structure actually breaks. It falls to pieces. And so then if you go out in the sun and you've already got weak skin, what happens? Bingo. Those cells can't replace themselves because there's nothing there, there's no nutrients getting there, and you get what's called skin cancer. But they call it sun cancer, which is really not correct. I spent hours and hours outside in the sun, and I just love it. I think it's the most crucial thing in our lives. Okay, so what happens when we don't get these essential fatty acids is we feel hungry all the time. We're always craving. There's this feeling of craving. And this can start right when you're a babe in arms. A lot of people don't have these fatty acids in their diet, or very, very small amount of fatty acids. So because it's important for the structure of the cells, let me just have a look here. I've got another diagram. Okay, so this just shows you how that fits into the cell structure. See those little curly pieces around the cell? They are the cell membrane. So your mitochondria, your cell membrane, the nucleus of your cell, all of those components of every cell in your body need these fats to form their structure. I'm just going to give a little demonstration of what it looks like when you have lots of essential fatty acids in your diet, which hemp can provide, of course. That's why I'm raving on about this stuff. Okay, if I've got lots of essential fatty acids, I can produce lots of cells. If I don't have these in my body, or I just have a little teeny amount, my cells might start to form. I won't put it in there. I'll just pretend I'm doing that now. And eventually, I run out. Oh, this is a good bubble blower. Okay, this is what happens when you don't have them. The bloodstream can't produce the fresh cells because there's no building material. No building material. Do you go to the petrol station and the guy checks your oil and he says, "Oh, I can't even see the oil on the dipstick, mate. You better put some few liters in there." You don't put a half a liter until you get home, do you? Or just that'll be enough, right? Half a liter. You'd fill it up, wouldn't you? But that's what most people are doing. They're putting a quarter of a liter, half a liter in their tank. You need about 4 liters, I think, to run the machine. But, well, depending on your machine, but most people, they are running on this empty dipstick. They just don't have those fats in their diet. So what happens is we age, we decompose, we start breaking down. When you're a baby, you get your mother's milk and you're working to get that fat in your body. That's the most crucial thing for the development of an infant in utero, as well as, you know, once we start growing. Our brain development, our body's growth. And you see this in kids. I've seen so many little kids. I've treated over 40,000 people over the years in lots of different capacities. And I see these little kids come in and they look really lackluster, or they might even be autistic or slightly down. And they have this kind of lost expression on their face. And the mother's body's, the immune system's compromised. You have to have this stuff for your immune system. How can you have a proper immune system if you can't even produce cells? So the other thing is the ADD. We're going to cover that one. But just to go back, the structure on this side here, oh, where's the button? This here is what we call a polyunsaturated trans fat. So instead of looking like this nice curvy shape, which fits into your cells and builds this nice strong wall and cell structure, we end up with a thing like this that inserts in between. And that starts weakening that structure. Also, the mitochondria, which is your powerhouse of your cell, doesn't get the power. Now, this one here just shows you how that's like a cancer-producing scenario. If my cells aren't getting nutrients, they start breaking down. Cancer cells are really weak. I've seen lots of people overcome cancer. Of course, I can't tell you how that can happen because that could be illegal. But I can assure you, if you don't have these oils in your body, you're asking for trouble. You're going to get a lot of other symptoms as well. So, let's see here. Let me get this thing figured out. Oh, I've got to talk about fish, but I'll just hold on a sec. Okay, going back to this picture, I love this one. Oh, come on. Now, years ago, I actually weighed a lot more than I weigh now, and I was always hungry. I had hypoglycemia. I was allergic to everything under the sun. I would go out in the rain and I would swell up because I was allergic to water. I was allergic to my own blood. And I wasn't getting these oils in my diet. I had huge compromises in my immune system, and I didn't know that. that's when I was working with other modalities, and I knew about nutrition and I knew lots of things about it, but this whole topic of essential fatty acids is so misunderstood. But if I don't get those fats in my diet, I'm always going to be craving. And so these little babies, they come out and the mother's milk doesn't have the fat, and so they're always needing and hungry. And then we keep eating and we keep eating. We're looking for this fix. There's something I need and I'm not getting it. And so one of the favorite things is fish and chips because it's nice and greasy. And your brain, it says, your body knows and your taste buds knows, and it says, I need something oily. I need something greasy. And my daughter, when she was little, I'd see her little feet under the fridge, and I'd go in there and she'd have her finger in the butter. She'd be eating the butter straight out of the bowl because her body was telling her, I need more fat, I need more fat. So my grandmother, who lived till 96, I said to her one day, why do you think you've lived this long? And she said, eat lots of fat, dear, it's good for you. But it's the right fat. And in those days, when she was growing up, people actually used to get dripping off meat and put it on their bread. They didn't have butter all the time. And nobody was dying of coronary problems and cancer. Oh, the odd person did, but it was very, very minimal amount of people. So then they ate loads of fat, and they poured cream all over everything and butter on everything. And it was the other thing that people ate in the old days, before modern times, say back in the early part of the century, was seeds. Everyone ate sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, walnuts, hazelnuts, seeds in your bread, whole grain, which has some of the essential fatty acids. So they weren't like craving this stuff all the time. They were getting their nutrients, so they were feeling good. These are just some of the deficiency symptoms of omega-3 and 6. Eczema, loss of hair. Anybody have that one? Liver degeneration, behavioral disturbances. Because you see these kids with ADD, they're squirming in their seats in school and they can't sit still. And that's because they're not getting these fats. There's been lots of tests done with these kids where they feed them the essential fatty acids. Next thing, oh, Johnny's all mellow now and he's really happy and relaxed. Why? Because now his motor's got the oil in there. Your glands dry up. Any organ in your body will start shriveling up if it's not getting these essential nutrients. Failure of wounds to heal, infections, sterility. If people don't have the ability to conceive, you put them on, saturate them with essential fatty acids, and next thing, they can make babies. The body's not going to make a baby if it doesn't have the right building blocks. Miscarriages, arthritis. So there's all your list. And then the other is the growth retardation. Problems in your arms and legs, your skin dries, your sticky platelets, you get cholesterol. Let's talk about cholesterol. What's the main cause of cholesterol? This is it here, sugar. This is the #1 product bought in the supermarkets in Australia. #1, or I think at least in the top 4. Thank you, Graham. Graham Sate's article that just came out, I quickly stole it off of his page. He won't mind. So essentially what happens when we eat sugar is we get the buzz, the energy, we go around, and then whatever you don't need, the excess, which our diets have gone from, 5 kilos per person per year to 65 kilos per person per year. So there's just sugar in everything, sugar, 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 which is more addictive than heroin. In fact, it has molecularly the same structure as heroin, except one bar is different. So it is a crystallized form of this energy, but what happens is when you eat it, whatever your body doesn't use, it turns it into vinegar. And then that vinegar turns into fat. And most of that fat is used as cholesterol. Now, cholesterol's not all that bad, and a lot of people don't understand that one at all either. What has this all got to do with hemp? Is because, as I said, the hemp's got the essential fatty acids and the highest profile of it. But let's just keep with the cholesterol story, because I think you need to understand that one. When you get this cholesterol in your blood, your body packs it away in different places. And you know, people talk about hardening of the arteries and clogging up. But the really interesting thing I found out from research was that the main use in the bloodstream in cholesterol is to patch up the holes in your arteries. that has been made from trans fats, those fatty acids that have been altered. Your body's trying to use that to make a fresh cell, but it can't use it because it's not the right shape. And it's a broken down cell. It's just like those bubbles that haven't been formed properly. If that cell isn't perfectly usable, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to sit there. So it just glues onto the side of your artery, and then it decomposes. Those cells in there decompose. You have to continually make fresh cells. So as that cell's decomposing, there might get a leak. And then we go, oh God, I've got to do something. The body in its great wisdom says, I've got the perfect tool. And it comes in and it plugs up that hole with cholesterol. So it's a very important thing, isn't it? And you need cholesterol, and your body produces cholesterol. And the most important thing for cholesterol is hormones. Cholesterol is what produces testosterone, estrogen. So if we don't have that in our blood, which we can produce, and if we go in the sun and we absorb vitamin D, it's virtually the same molecule as cholesterol. And that's what builds your hormones. So all the people that go out on the beach, they're like they feel more alive, they feel more sexual because they have those cholesterols that are building those hormones. But with sugar, what it does is it produces the bad cholesterol. It turns it into a nasty little fat that you can't really use, and you might store it for later. But unlike healthy sugars, where you get them from carbohydrates, which if you store that fat, or these healthy fats that we get from essential fatty acids or foods that are whole, you can use that later on. You can store that fat and say, okay, now I need some energy and burn it. But if you make fat out of sugar, what you end up with is just fat. And you can't turn that back into, you can't turn it back into the building blocks that you need to make healthy fat, which is the other fatty acids. There's lots and lots of different fatty acids, and it's not just omega-3 and 6. They're all important for energy and cell production too, but with this unhealthy fat, you end up just storing it, and then the only way you can get rid of it is you've got to work it off. You've got to burn, burn, burn. You can whip yourself and try to get rid of this stuff, but the best way to not get cholesterol that's bad and have excess weight is just feed your body those essential fatty acids, and then you don't crave it. You don't crave sugar, and you don't crave a lot of things. You know, in animal husbandry, there's a thing called cribbing, and that's where the animal starts chewing the housing that it lives in, because it's craving something. Kids do it at school. We used to chew our pencil. You know, you're going mad sitting there. Anyway, cribbing is a deficiency symptom. It's like, I'm needing something and I'm not getting it. So that's where a lot of us are. So we have a smoke or we have a coffee. You know, I need energy, but I'm not getting it. How am I going to get that energy? I'm going to give myself what it needs. I'm going to fill up my oil sump with some healthy essential fatty acids. And the best way I've found, and the most balanced way, is to consume hemp oil. Now, let's talk about fish. How many people in here have used fish oil? Lots of us have tried it. In the good old days, the fishermen would come in off the wharves and they'd get all this fillets, nice fillets, and then they'd take the guts and the brains and the eyeballs and the tail and chuck it all in a vat. And then they'd kind of brew it and soak it for a while, and all the fat would come up to the surface and they'd eat it. And these guys were pretty healthy and robust. You see those Nordic guys with the bright blue eyes and the never die, you know, they go on until they're 95 or something. And they ate all this fish oil. But in modern times, what's happened is fish oil has become a huge industry. And back in the 50s, when they started working with building margarine, they would take fish oil because it smelled so bad. They had to bleach it, they boiled it, they deodorized it, and then it could be used. But as I just told you before, once you do all those processes, you've virtually denatured those essential fatty acids. So, but how do they get this oil out of fish? I ask people that. Do you know how they do it? When you get that beautiful, nice, clean, neat-looking capsule of oil, what's it gone through? How did it get to there? Wait a minute. Here, I've got to go back again. Same process again that they do to the vegetable oils. Bleach, boil, deodorize, and what do we get at the end? We get cellular degeneration. In fact, there's been a lot of studies that indicated that when you eat this denatured oil, this was known back in the 50s, folks. I'm not making this up. I'm just reporting the facts. If you eat denatured oils, that they knew this back then, what you're going to do is you're going to create this whole toxic chain. There was a lady in the 50s who discovered fatty acids. Her name was Joanna Budvig, and she's a real hero of mine because she was incredibly noble in her work. She actually was nominated for the Nobel Prize 7 times and never given it, and she should have been given it. She knew guys like Max Planck and Einstein, and you know, they knew, and Otto Warburg, they knew that if our body didn't have the right nutrients in there, that we were going to get this degeneration. They knew all this stuff then, but they said, oh, her boss, apparently, she worked in the laboratory, and she learned how to, through paper chromatography, she learned how to differentiate fats. She was the person that discovered these essential fatty acids and the crucial role they had. But her boss was developing the process of hydrogenization to turn oils into margarine. So he said, no, we don't want that out there. You're not going to get the prize. Even though thousands of people were coming to her. Her oil she used was flaxseed oil. Lots of you might know her story. And flax oil is great, and it's very high in omega-3, and it still has the omega-6, and it's very nutritious, but it's not, for long-term use, it's probably not the most balanced oil to use. There's lots and lots of oils with omegas in them, but you've got to get it in the right state, the right state. So in her work, she was trying to explain to everybody and tell the world, you've got to have these oils, you've got to have these oils. And time after time, people with cancer would come to her, and she'd study their blood, and there was these little signs in there where these tails on the end of the oil would be the wrong color. As soon as she'd administer the oil, that changed, and so also the person would change, and they would start to regenerate, which they took her to court, and they raked her over the coals, and we're going to put you in jail, and then thousands of her patients would arrive at the court and say, no, no, we got healed. And then one time it was the crucial one where it was, okay, we're going to nail this lady. And then the judge said, oh, you know, actually I've done it too, and I got better. So she kept getting off the hook, you know. But the whole thing was, back then in the 50s, they knew about this whole thing. But it was such a big, very, very valuable industry. And they somehow knew that if we feed people these kind of oils, then they would get, you know, more and more consumption of oil, because they wouldn't be getting what they need. So it was the old, we'll give them poison, and then they'll need the real good thing. So they'll have to keep trying to get it. And that's what's happened, that vicious circle.
So how do we get big hunks amounts of this special oil?
How do we get big hunks of this special oil? Well, you can eat essential fatty acids through hemp oil, flax oil, pumpkin seed oil. There's a lot of different oils that cover it. Hemp oil just happens to be in the most perfect ratio. And right now, because there's a very low production of hemp oil in Australia, comparatively speaking, and it's virtually unknown, and people still think they're going to be eating marijuana, so they're a bit freaked out about that. There's so much ignorance about it, so people don't realize it. The beautiful thing about hemp oil is it tastes really good. I think it's the best. I ate flax oil for years, and I called up a lady in Australia who I've known for many years, and I used to buy big volumes of her oil. And she produced flax oil. And you know what she told me? She said, I went to the doctors because something was going wrong with my skin. Her skin actually went hard. And she was told that she had a fatty acid deficiency. Funny. This is a person that eats flax oil every day. The problem is if you don't have omega-6, you become deficient. If you eat too much omega-3, you become deficient in omega-6. So her balance was out. And so now she's consuming more omega-6. And it's all about balance. You need both of them. They both keep each other in check, those two oils. So going back to Joanna Budvig, though, she found that cancer patients would respond immediately to high doses. Arthritis patients, diabetes. I had a guy come into my office and I convinced him to feed his dog this oil. And he took a liter. He was a really interesting guy. He was gay and really lovely man, you know, and a little bit chubby and rotund, you know, and he came to me and said, yeah, I want to try that, and you know, I've got all these problems. And I said, okay. And 6 weeks later, he came back for another bottle of this oil. He used a whole liter in 6 weeks. And it was amazing. He'd lost about 20 kilos of weight, and he looked great. And he said to me, you know what? He said, I know you probably can't tell everybody this because it's sort of a legal thing. We're not allowed to claim cures or things like that. But he'd stopped using insulin because his pancreas somehow regenerated miraculously. And I get calls every week from people that used to have skin cancer and now they don't have skin cancer. They used to have eczema, now they don't have eczema. There's just so many different things that come up as symptoms because we don't have those oils in our body. The other funny thing about that guy was he told me, just on the side, he said, oh, and the other thing is I'm getting married to a woman. So maybe, you know, maybe the hormones really kicked into high gear and he got totally transformed, and I don't know. Maybe he was doing it to keep his mother happy, but I thought that was great. I'm just going to travel across here if I can get this thing to work. The dog's got lots of puppies now too. The dog. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's just talk about the brain. This just shows us that one of the most crucial factors for having essential fatty acids, and particularly omega-3, is we need it for our brain cells. So this on the left, this shows us how normally these little receptors dock into here, into the cells. These are the saturated fats along here, and unsaturated fats have these curly tails on them. But basically the cell structure is made with these fats, right? And in a good healthy situation that will just dock in there. But what happens is when we don't have the nutrients we need, that just won't form properly. And this loading dock, this guy, he comes along and he can't get in there. These receptors, they can't lock in. So then what do we call that? Yeah, what is my name? Who are you? Yeah, we get Alzheimer's because the brain starts just shriveling up. Do you ever walk into the room and say, what did I come in here for? And that starts happening very young to a lot of people. And I just don't know if it's your memory or if it's just because you haven't got those essential fatty acids working. So with the ADD, with kids with these conditions where they're not sitting still, I know lots of adults that have that too, by the way. With ADD, these kids, they're super active. And some kids are really, really smart, and they're sitting in school and they're going nuts because they have these advanced minds and thinking, but they're nutritionally struggling. And they might have too much sugar from breakfast, or they might be, you know, just on your normal, I'm going to have a Coke for lunch, and then I might eat a sandwich. And they've got all these wrong fats running around in their bloodstream. But the brain that's saying, come on, I'm growing and I need to expand and get going, it's just not getting it. It's just not getting it. There's no connection happening in there. So this is one of the most important things, to have these fats in the body. This is how most people live. Oh, sorry. This is how most people live in cities. All over the world, people are living in cities. And I think today we're going to get a wonderful talk from a man who's been involved with some books from a lady from Russia, Anastasia. And I felt so happy when I read those books because I kind of live like that already. It's a lifestyle thing. The more we live in cities and the more we absorb pollutants and get all of this toxic buildup in our system, the more we feel unhappy and we break down. So ultimately, the solution to how are we going to get all this stuff, one of the most important things is we've got to go back to living a simple lifestyle. And if we grow hemp and we produce all the things we need on the land, we can take back the original power that we were given on living on this earth. We're not relying on all these big corporations and the pollution, just on a level of energy too, with carbon, where you go in the city and everyone's driving around in cars. Hemp can produce cellulose that can make ethanol that is absolutely clean. I saw a guy where they drove a car and they made this ethanol for about 5 cents a liter. And they drove the car, and when they put their glove inside the exhaust pipe, which was a white glove, there wasn't any dirt on his finger. There's just, the only thing that comes out of the exhaust pipe is water. It's so clean. But yet we're not allowed to have that. We're not allowed to have that fuel. And cellulose is what makes the ethanol. And hemp has a huge, huge amount of cellulose, comparatively speaking, and it grows at a rapid rate. So there's just another thing where we can do it. There are farmers that make their own ethanol, and they burn that in their tractor. Some people here are involved with those kind of things with fuel, but it's just another example. So ultimately, where we need to go is we need to lift our consciousness up, and where hemp fits into that picture is, let's see here, get this thing going back again. These receptors, okay? Joanna Budvig, the scientist I mentioned before, in her work, because she was very spiritually attuned as well, she discovered that when we have those fats in our body, and particularly our brain, what we become is superconductors. And so, as she described it, when we eat the bad oils and fats, we actually become what's anti-mensch, or it's against man. It's a not for human food. And when we eat it, we become not human. And so what she suggested is that when you consume large amounts of these oils, it speeds up the electron processes in the cellular structure of your body. They actually start moving faster and faster. And this also gives the spring to the DNA. But it's like this. We're creatures that belong out in the sun. When we go in the sun and we consume these seed oils, the seed oil contains this vibrational quality in its molecular makeup through these fats to pull in the electron energy of the sun, the photon energy of the sun. And this then imbues you with this electron energy. You become a light body. You become a vibrating, beautiful antenna for this light. And if our brains are more developed and we are able to receive more information and more attuning ourselves to nature and the true nature of our being, and as that speeds up and as we get more and more light into us, we become more conscious. And that's the other side from the drug story of hemp, where we actually become more conscious. So the fatty acid story is very important because we can create this world to live in, or we can create this world to live in, where we have healthy babies, we have the consciousness moving forward, or we can go backwards. We can stay in that world. So what you're being fed and what your body's being made out of is crucially important. This is why I wanted to give you this message today, because I feel that these oils particularly need a lot of attention. And if you have essential fatty acids in your diet, you will notice you will notice very rapidly how you look at things will start changing. You will become more calm. You will become more happy. Lots and lots of people who have been tested with psychological problems and depression, which is one of the biggest drug prescriptions that's going on now, is giving people drugs for depression, is purely they don't have those fats in their body. As soon as they get the fats, suddenly they feel good, they feel happy. And that's going back to the antenna, the drawing of the cosmic energy into the body. So all of the talks that have been going on over the weekend, many, many things are pointing towards this consciousness, becoming conscious. Where did this consciousness, these ancient civilizations, these evolved civilizations or beings or the skull, whatever it is, what creates these things is an amazing consciousness, or what we are creating is all consciousness. And so we have that choice. We can choose to wake up, or we can just stay asleep. And a lot of people, it's just too hard for them. I used to do a lot of work in body electronics where we would get people saturate their bodies with nutrients, and they would just regenerate. Amazing things would happen. Their hair would change color overnight, just like whew, instant. And it's because they were saturating their body again with the thing that makes their life force work. But the oil is very, very crucial for that. So yes, I hope you all get your amino acids and your essential fatty acids. And I was very happy to be here with all of you. It's like a big happy family, and thank you very much for having me.